Welcome in, college football fans, especially the Auburn Tigers fans. It's your turn on the whipping post. Auburn is a team that is certainly on the rise. Very excited to talk some Tigers football. If you guys don't mind, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, support your local college football analyst or commentary guys or whatever the hell we are. I think we're just a couple of super fans, is what we are, just like you. So share the love, share it with your best friend, share it with your Auburn Tigers grandpa, whatever. We're here to talk Auburn Tigers football throughout the year, SEC football, all that good stuff. Mason, how you doing today, man? When this thing comes out, we'll be, 44 days away from kickoff? Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Less than 6
Wow.
weeks away. Man, I can't wait. The 2024 season can't come soon enough. We say it over and over again, but this is going to be one of the biggest seasons that we've ever seen as college football fans. Big reason why we're doing this show is in preparation for a changing landscape of college football, and I'm excited to break it down with you, Mark, and with you, Auburn Tiger fans and college football fans who are watching this. We appreciate your support in this so much, and we just ask that you continue to comment and make it a community that you want to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. As we said, this is we're breaking down all our season previews going into the 2024 season, and Auburn has landed at the number 28 spot. Listen, we're not necessarily ranking teams where we think they'll finish after the season, but for all intents and purposes, Auburn ended up in the 28 hole, and here we go. Hugh Freeze coming into his second year as the head man of the Auburn Tigers football program, 6-7 last year. And it did not take long for coach to pull the trigger and pull the rug out from under some coaches' feet in some situations, and just kind of allow some guys to move on so that he can bring in some of the guys that he wanted. And as I said, it did not take very long to do so. So I am super happy for the Auburn fans as they, it seems like, got an uptick in coaching talent. You bring in a guy like Derek Nix to call this offense, Mason. We all know that this is Hugh Freeze's offense, right? We all know that is, that we're going back to the Hugh Freeze way of running offense, calling the offense. The verbiage is the same as it was at Ole Miss when he was there. So why not bring in a guy that's been at Ole Miss since he's been there to come help get this offense in order and change the lingo and get it to where Coach Hugh Freeze is very, very comfortable helping out with this offense. I think this was a look, the whole reason Hugh Freeze was hired at Auburn was for his offensive coaching prowess, right? I mean, it's got to be. What else do you hire this guy for? I mean, he had all the baggage in the world, so you had to eat, the PR, little bit of a nightmare that is hiring the guy. You hired him because he's an offensive mastermind. And bringing in a guy like Derek Nix, who was there from the beginning of it all, I think is a huge, huge get for the Auburn Tigers. What do you think about Hugh Freeze in his first year? There was some good moments, Mason, really good moments. You see the results there on your screen. One funny thing is, before I throw it over to you, if you went and watched Auburn's spring game, you'll notice that the defense started the game up 27-0. Now, what do you think? Why do you think that they would set that at 27? Because that's how many points Georgia scored against Auburn last year, and that's how many points Auburn scored, or Alabama scored against Auburn last year. 27 points apiece. That's the standard. That's how Mason, that's how far away they feel like they are, right? Mm-hmm. It's if we can hold these teams under that again, we can score 30 and we can win this football game. That's going to be the recipe for success for this Auburn football team. Didn't have the firepower to get it done last year. Not a bad defense, not a bad running team, Mason. They ran the ball pretty well. Couldn't throw worth a lick. Couldn't move the ball through the air worth a lick, and it bit them in the butt several times. Should have never lost the Alabama game. We'll be talking about that game for years. We don't have to rehash the whole thing here. I'm sure Auburn fans will be happy that we don't. What do you think about the results from last year? Coach Hugh Freeze coming in, new regime. Now he's kind of cleaning the slate again and saying these are my guys on my coaching staff. These are who I want to roll with.
Well, I think, if you want to look at the 2023 season and say, whether or not they achieved or overachieved or underachieved, you got to look at what the standard was heading into the 2023 season. I know a lot of Auburn fans were saying, "Can we go bowling?" Right, and that's a question that Tigers fans are not really familiar with asking themselves: is are we a bowl team or not? But ultimately, they did get over that hump. They did win 6 games, and I think that when you look at that now, should have won against New Mexico State. So, I don't want to put too much.
Ouch.
Yeah, that was a tough one. That was a tough one to lose for sure. But look, this was a team that should have, would have, but could have potentially won 8 games last year. And they end up with 6. But ultimately, for the first season, and really a dumpster fire that Hugh Freeze inherited, I think that you have to feel pretty good about the program and their trajectory heading into 2024.
One of the things that he said on the sideline of the spring game that the commentators asked him, what's the biggest difference between the team that's stepping out on the field this spring versus what team, the team that stepped out on the field last spring was. He said, we have a actual full team. And it kind of just goes to show you're exactly right, Mason. He was working with a lot of nothing last year, okay? And just having the actual amount of players that you're supposed to have is a step up from what they had in 2023. So I suspect that things will continue to trend up. And I know Hugh Freeze likes to play things pretty close to the vest. He's not gonna go out and just brag on a bunch of kids that haven't proven themselves week in and week out on Saturdays. So he's going to do a good job of tempering expectations a little bit, and keeping guys' feet on the ground. And I think that is definitely a good trait for your head coach. You can kind of see some of the head coaching record accomplishments and things for the coach there. 80-54 overall, 5-3 in bowl games. But everybody remembers him at Ole Miss. He is a guy that is from right there at Ole Miss University. He grew up in that area, so it was a dream job for him. Things happened. He wasn't able to keep his job after some of the poor decisions that he had made. I think he's learned from those, but all in all, this is a great ball coach. I think that this offense is going to take a big step in the right direction. And it's has a lot to do with Derek Nix, who we talked about. You can kind of see where he's went and coached over the last few years, mainly at Ole Miss, right? And so it's kind of bringing a guy back from the past and teaming up with him, a guy that that you're on the same page with. I think that's going to be big for this team. Bring in DJ Durkin on the defense. Another guy that's kind of had a tumultuous past, right? But all in all, a guy that I think is a very serviceable defensive coordinator and will do a fine job. Let's jump into more of the roster stuff. Notable offensive returners, Mason. You bring back Payton Thorne. Let's start with the quarterback. That's what everybody wants to talk about. Why did Auburn not go get a transfer portal quarterback? What are your thoughts on that, and what do you think is the answer to that question?
Well, because the quarterback wasn't really the issue. Was he a Heisman hopeful? No, we never expected Payton Thorne to be realistically. But to me, the challenge was always with the wide receiver group. You had guys dropping balls, you had guys missing assignments, and you had guys who were just not getting open. And it's really clear that that's how Hugh Freeze felt his program performed, and that unit performed, and that is evident by what they went out and did in the high school ranks, but in the transfer portal as well, and in bringing in the receiver talent that they did. I mean, I don't know the figures, but I I think it's safe to assume that they put a lot of money into that wide receiver room this offseason, and they're hoping that it's going to pay dividends, and I think it will.
That's why you get them big boosters like the owner, I forget his name now, but the Yellowwood, right? That's why you get those big boosters to come help out your NIL program to bring in those awesome freshmen who we're going to get to here in just a second. I just want to elaborate for a second on this quarterback room because, look, a lot of it's the same faces, okay? But that doesn't mean this room didn't get any better. You bring in a guy like Walker White, a guy that we saw in the spring game who clearly has got arm talent for days, right? They said that right now he's kind of swimming, and what I think they mean by that is he's treading water a bit, trying to get caught up to the college game, the speed, the playbook, the just all the different little things that go into being a Auburn quarterback or an SEC quarterback. For all intents and purposes, Payton Thorne is your man, okay? But you got Holden Griner, Hank Brown. But as I said, Payton Thorne's your guy. 61.1% completion last year, 1,755 yards, 16 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Was sacked 31 times, but I think a lot of the reason that he was sacked 31 times is he took off a lot. 515 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns rushing. And look, the Georgia game last year, I felt like we saw a different Auburn team from the Georgia game on last year. That's really kind of how I felt. I felt like this offense kind of found their identity. Was it the identity that they wanted? I don't think so. And not super entertaining, not the best, like the funnest brand of football to watch necessarily what we saw last year. But boy, did they run the ball effectively, Mason. About 100 and let's see, number 23 in the nation last year and number 4 in the SEC in rushing, 189 yards per game. That's a good foundation to build your offense on, but I think they're looking for more of a threat downfield this year. And to your point that you just made just a minute ago, I think the wide receivers are going to be a lot better. Now, they're young, but I think they're going to be able to keep the football. And as you see on the right side of your screen there, Rivaldo Fairweather is back. We'll get to him in just a minute. Very interesting piece to this offense, in my opinion. A guy who accounted for about half the touchdowns that were thrown through the air last year. Pretty impressive stuff there. Excuse me, I got the coughs today. Auburn's class of 2024 is the class that Auburn is most proud of over the recent years, certainly. 30 commitments, had a 5-star, but 11 ESPN 300 guys, right? Cam Coleman being one of those guys. Number 5 in the ESPN 300. He's the number 3 wide receiver in the country. Cam Coleman is the real deal. He's the real deal. Everybody on the sidelines of the spring game is sitting there saying, "Oh man, this guy's different, isn't he? This guy's different." Everybody knows. Everybody knows that this guy has got that George Pigeon quality. George Pickens quality. He's got the it factor. He's got the body. He's got the speed. He's got the hands. Super, super excited. In the spring game, I felt like there's not a ton of chemistry built quite yet. And that's just going to come with time, right? I'm really, really, really excited about the outlook and what the next couple of years is going to look like for the Auburn Tigers with this awesome influx of talent that they've got coming in. That's not even to mention their offensive transfer additions. What do you think about a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith coming over from Penn State? This is something that we've talked about a couple of times in the offseason already, but now that we're talking Auburn football, we'd be remiss if we didn't speak on what 24/7 is considering to be their top transfer portal addition team-wide. So we just talked about the young guys in the wide receiver room. How about you throw an old guy in there to show them how to go through the day in and day out of being a college football player and a go-to guy on an offense? I think this was a huge pickup.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at Keandre Lambert-Smith at Penn State, right? And you think, well, his numbers are pretty underwhelming, but he was asked to do a ton at Penn State. He was asked to be the guy. And I don't think he's going to be asked to be that guy at Auburn. He's got some other weapons. Payton Thorne will have some other weapons to throw to, and he's not going to be the only one that the defense is going to have to account for. So when you've got a guy like Cam Coleman playing on the opposite end of you, it kind of spreads the field open a little bit. And I think that, these defenses are going to have to account for not only Keandre Lambert Smith, but also Cam Coleman, also a potential Perry Thompson, who's coming in as a true freshman, who was a 5-star in his own right by some recruiting services, and also Robert Lewis, who I think is going to be sort of the unsung hero of this wide receiver room when it's all said and done. Somebody who's going to come in and play out of the slot, who's very productive at Georgia State, and is going to get a lot of looks because of the attention that the other wide receivers and the tight end that you mentioned are going to be getting. I think you see Robert Lewis get a pretty good uptick in production, and I think he's going to be one that by the end of the year, Alabama fans are going to be, looking at Robert Lewis and saying, "Man, we got to cover this guy," and not so much the other ones. Not to say he's more talented than the other players, but I think this is a guy who's going to be very productive for this team, and sort of a possession type receiver that you don't want to have to cover because he's pesky and he catches the ball. He's got good hands. He runs good routes. And it's tough. I think that he brings at 5'11", 185, a sense of toughness to the slot position that Auburn fans would have loved to have had last year.
Robert Lewis reminds me of myself on the basketball court, and let me explain. No God-given talent, right? He's my size. Actually, he's exactly my size. 5'11", 185. I might be a little closer to 190. I'll admit it. And it's all 5 of those pounds are right here on my waistline. So beautiful thing. Luckily the screen only goes down to about right here, but he's a workhorse.
Yeah.
He's not going to stop. When I'm on the basketball court, I suck. But guess what? You're going to be tired if you're guarding me. You're going to be tired. I'm going to wear you out because I'm never going to stop moving. And I feel like Robert Lewis is that type of pesky offensive player. And Mason, I totally agree with you. Look, this freshman class is unbelievable, guys. It is. It's unbelievable. I think in probably their sophomore season, they're going to be really, really good. In their junior year, there's no telling what the ceiling is for these guys, especially if Walker White can develop, a rapport with these guys over a couple years. But to be honest with you, they're still freshmen. And bringing in a guy like Keandre Lambert Smith, I think, was one of the biggest moves that this Auburn team made. And I see that 24/7 obviously agrees with me, the number one addition that they've made in the transfer portal this year. You need some of that leadership. You need some of that veteran presence in that wide receiver room because there's a lot more to it than hitting a go route and catching a ball. And Cam Coleman can do that better than anybody else on this team right now. You give him a go, and say catch it. That's the guy to go do that. But there's a lot more to playing wide receiver in the SEC than just that. And Keandre Lambert Smith is going to be able to help out with that. Robert Lewis is going to be able to help out with that. Camden Brown is a guy that has fought injuries a lot, but I'm going to tell you something. In that spring game, looked like a guy that was extremely hungry to me. A guy that looks like he's got something to prove. I think Camden Brown is going to be one of the go-to guys on this team this year, especially in between the 20s. I think Keandre Lambert Smith and him are going to be your between the 20s guys. I don't think Lambert Smith is much of a red zone threat, but boy, he can dice you up in between those 20s, and you got to have guys like that. And I think Rivaldo Fairweather is going to continue to be a red zone threat, like he was last year. I felt like, tight ends accounted for 50% of all touchdown passes last year for this team. Now, we already said this wasn't a good passing team, so that may have been an outlier a little bit, but I don't see this offense going away from the tight end room completely. I think it's still going to be a big-time red zone target, and I think they've got a guy that they can go to. And by the way, bring in a transfer, Rico Walker, to come in and help with that tight end room as well. I'm feeling good about the pass catchers on this team, much, much better than what I felt like last year. Obviously, a horrible receiving core in 23, total overhaul in 24. It didn't come a moment too soon. I'm super, super happy with it. Let's talk about the running back room. Another room that I'm super happy with. As I said before in the show, number 23 in the nation last year in rushing the football. That's in the nation, folks. Top 25. If you're top 25, that's where you got to be. Okay. You want to be a national championship contender. I don't think all is that this year necessarily, but if you want to be one of those contenders, you got to be top 25 in damn near everything, right? You got to be pretty good at just about everything. And this was an area in which this team was good last year, and they're going to continue to be good this year, I believe, because Jarquez Hunter's back, right? Back for his senior season, 909 yards, leading rusher last year, 5.7 yards per rush. Damari Alston, he's back, over 5 yards per rush last year. Didn't get the carries he wanted, but that's why he's back. Jeremiah Cobb, he's going to look for more carries. That's more of a guy that can come out of the backfield and catch the ball for you a lot. So a lot of returning faces, and I think that's an awesome thing for this running back room that was already good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jarquez Hunter, he's going to be one of the best running backs once again in the SEC. I think this team, at the beginning of the season, I think that this team is going to want to run the football first. As the season goes on, I'm hoping that we get what we want out of Payton Thorne and his ability to connect with these wide receivers, and they become a more complete offense. But right out of the gate, I like Jarquez Hunter a lot. I like Alston a lot. He's kind of that thumper there coming in, and he'll hit you. Baddie is just that. He's a baddie. He can run the football. He can tote the rock too. So
I will say this. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Brian Batty is not going to be there this year.
Okay.
He got shot.
Really?
Yeah. His brother was murdered, and he was shot in the same instance, and he's on a ventilator.
Wow.
So horrible situation there for Brian Beatty, and hate that for him. Yeah, look, hey, you never know. Humans are strong beings. If he's got the determination, he may come back one day. I don't know, but as for right now, he is absent.
Got it. But regardless, I mean, that's a terrible situation, but regardless, I do feel good about the running back room. I think that they've got a pretty decent offensive line to run behind, and obviously they had some success in the running backs, in the running game last season, and I expect that to continue. But that's where, to me, this offense with Hugh Freeze is going to lean on first. That's kind of what they want to get going initially, get that established, not just in each game, but at the beginning of the season, and allow that passing game to come to fruition towards the end of the season when they're really going to need it in some big games.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep it moving. Let's talk about this offensive line. Honestly, Mason, for the last few years, I felt like this offensive line needed an overhaul. I think they kind of got it last year, and now I feel like you're going to be able to kind of grow on that a little bit. You bring in a guy like Percy Lewis over from Mississippi State, immediate starter on your offensive line. I think that was obviously a huge get. Anybody you're bringing in that's going to start immediately, I think is awesome. Connor Lew is definitely the anchor of this offensive line, and really one of the leaders. I think he's going to be one of the leaders of this offense in general. We'll see. We're just going to have to kind of see with some of these guys. I mean, you would assume that some of them would get better after another year. They were good at running the football last year, Mason. Are they going to be able to pass protect whenever it's time to start throwing the ball around like you talked about? That's just something I feel like we don't really know right now, because we haven't seen this offensive line pass block when they went and backed up and pass blocked last year, it was to the surprise of a defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and so with that being said, I feel like we don't really know what they're all about. Gave up a pretty good bit of sacks last year, but the quarterback was running around with the football a ton in his hand, not getting rid of it at certain times, and taking sacks behind the line on what were really actually rushes. So I feel like I'm still kind of lost on this offensive line as far as how effective they will be. Are they going to be top half of the SEC or bottom half of the SEC? I think they're going to be somewhere right in the middle, but we're just going to have to see, brother. What's your take on it? What do you think about this offensive line? I think they're probably right around the middle of the pack of the 16 SEC teams.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say, which is a good place to be for the
It's
worst
not
unit
bad.
on this
Yeah.
offense. I mean, this isn't and a lot of the middle of the pack SEC teams have this same issue, right? It's the offensive line in particular, but also the defensive line.
Yeah.
Being good on the lines along the lines of scrimmage is going to make or break a program. Um, you bring back some experience, and you get some experience in your left tackle and Percy Lewis. How does he mesh with this offensive line unit? That's going to be a big question mark. But to me, on this offense, yeah, the offensive line is the biggest question mark of really this whole team. And whether or not they're able to step up and reduce the amount of sacks that happened last year. You mentioned a lot of those were self-induced by Payton Thorne and his, scrambling and not just getting rid of the football like maybe he should have. I'm sure some Auburn fans were, on the edge of their seat, just telling him to throw the football out of bounds or whatnot. But ultimately, they got to play better. It's not all on the quarterback, and it never is in football. So this unit needs to be really good. Needs to be not really good. I think if Peyton Thorne is reading the defense well pre-snap and those receivers are getting open, I think they're going to have some success. But can they hold up long enough? Can they give them 4 or 5 seconds every play? That's going to be the big question mark to me.
Yeah. Yeah. How will they do pass protecting when the defense knows they're going to pass? That's
Mm-hmm.
that's my biggest thing. The best teams in the country, you know what they're about to do, and they do it anyway. And that's what will this offensive line be able to impose their will on SEC caliber defenses? That's specifically on the lines of scrimmage. That is yet to be seen. And I think it can be true also for the defensive line. So with that being said, let's kind of jump over into the defensive side. Put a pin in the line there for just a minute, and we'll talk about transfer additions. You bring over a guy like Antonio Kite. This was something that a lot of people have talked about. I don't think he's got a ton of experience or anything, but definitely a very talented guy, a borderline 4-star kind of guy. He's a 3-star on 24/7. He comes over from Alabama back in January, and for all intents and purposes, it seems like everybody's pretty impressed. He's going to be a really nice depth piece for what I already consider a pretty good couple of cornerbacks that Auburn has got going to be playing on Saturdays. As you can see, you can see some defensive linemen, safety, defensive linemen. And look, the one thing I learned more and more about going through all these teams and after the transfer portal era, it's kind of like recruiting. You say follow the commitments, right? And you'll see what a team is needing and what their priorities are. It's the same thing with the transfer portal. You can see the defensive line is something that Auburn is trying to make moves on and add bodies and add talent at the same time. Linebacker, defensive line, edge. These are all guys that are going to be able to contribute, especially guys like Trill Carter, who everybody is super excited about. And I know Texas is probably pretty disappointed to lose a defensive line in a year where they lost a bunch of really good defensive linemen.
Yeah.
So Trill Carter played behind some of the best in the game last year, and Auburn fans are hoping that he learned a little something and can bring something to this defensive line. Mason, if I had 2 questions on this defense, it's defensive line and it's safety, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
So let's tackle that first one. Defensive line, you're counting on guys like Kendrick Falk, Jason Jones, and Trill Carter to step up. Specifically, Jason Jones and Isaiah Rakes are going to be your plus 300-pound guys in the middle, I'm thinking, right? Going to need them to be the anchors of this defensive line. But I still feel as though there's a lot of unanswered questions. Not to say that this is going to be a bad defensive line. I'm not saying that. But I don't think it's going to be just this overwhelming force. What do you think?
Yeah, they're really lacking that Derek Brown, type of
Yeah.
player right in the middle. And And I don't think that that guy exists on this roster, unfortunately. This is going to be a play by committee type of unit, I guess. And we're going to have to see a lot of rotating pieces, keep them fresh, and just find that playmaker. Trill Carter could be that guy that steps up and is super productive. And I think Keys could be a guy at defensive tackle that kind of comes in and plays a big role at 6'5", 290. Pretty big guy coming over from Kansas. They were certainly hated losing him, but ultimately, between them, I think you've got some pretty good pieces there that you can work with, and then you've got some depth pieces, but behind them, but ultimately, this defensive line front unit is probably the weakest on the defense.
And Auburn is going to be facing some pretty daggum good running attacks this season, as we'll see whenever we jump into the schedule. Every year that you play in the SEC, you're going to face some really good running attacks, but especially this season, I feel as though there's some very, very strong offensive lines that are going to be more than happy to run the ball down your throat if you allow them to. Let's jump into the linebackers, and we can kind of talk about that for just a second. The guy on the left side of that slide there, Jalen McLeod, Mason, is a big piece to this defense, and I suspect that will continue to be the case, and possibly even take it up a notch in 2024. 50 total tackles last year, 5.5 sacks. This is a big piece to add, or to bring back, alongside Eugene Asante, who had 86 total tackles last year, 55 of those solo, 5 sacks. I think those are two really, really nice pieces in the linebacker room. I don't have a ton of concerns at linebacker for Auburn this year. Again, as I said, I think defensive line and safety are more of the concerns. Now, this is a physical game. Injuries happen. Who knows what could happen, behind these guys. But, man, there's some awesome young talent behind them, too, that I'm super, super excited to see play. So even if these guys, got hurt or come out of a game with a big lead, I think you're going to see some ultra talented young guys come in behind them. Pretty happy with the linebacker core as it sits now. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Jalen McLeod is certainly your signal caller on the defense, and he's kind of your go to guy there in the middle of the pack. And I'm with you. I mean, I think that this is kind of the glue of the defense here in the middle of the field, and they've got the right players in the right places in a lot of ways. Some good leadership there, good experience, and then behind them you've got the uber talented Demarcus Riddick and Amaris Williams.
Riddick is the one that I think we're going to be talking about him a lot, Mason.
Yeah. And Amaris Williams, I think, is a guy who will be, in 2 or 3 seasons, he'll be, one of the next ones that steps up and makes some plays as well. But that's kind of what you want. You got the veteran leadership there in the middle of the field. You got some good talent behind them. They also bring in another transfer there to add some depth in the middle of the field. So I'm with you. I think this is a pretty good unit here for Auburn.
Yeah, I like the linebacker core. I don't have a ton of questions there. And we didn't even. I mean, we showed them on your screen just a second ago. You can go back and look at some of those transfer additions. There's several pieces that were added in the linebacker room through the transfer portal as well. I like the starters. I like the depth. I really like this linebacker group a lot. Let's kind of talk about the secondary. And you can kind of see on your screen there some of those defensive ESPN 300 recruits. So those are young guys that you're probably going to get a chance to see from time to time throughout the season. One of my favorite defensive pickup for this team in last season's recruiting class was DeMarcus Riddick, and I'm not alone in that. This defensive coaching staff said that he is absolutely popping on the field, and is a guy that's going to have to get some playing time. He's going to have to play some, and I think that's an awesome thing to have some young talent there in that linebacker room. Let's talk about the secondary. Before we go to the schedule, Kay and Lee and Keontae Scott are obvious starters, right? Um, After a couple transfer departures, opportunities have really opened up for rotational reps in 24 and honestly starting spots in 25. If you really want to sit and think about it, I mean, any Auburn fan, you're probably not looking at this season saying, okay, we're going for the natty, right?
Mhm.
But in 25, it is possible. I mean, you really got to be in that mindset of, okay, we're here to compete, and if we're the real deal in 2025, this 2024 season is going to be kind of a tryout for a lot of these young corner guys to get in there and take some reps rotationally and see who's going to fit into this mold in 2025, because you're not going to have Keontae Scott around anymore. I think Kay and Lee will still be there. I think he's a sophomore this year, but
Mhm.
um, I think that you've got a really good opportunity for guys to come in and see some of the younger talent without having to absolutely throw them in the deep end. So this might be a good mix of young talent and guys that have got some leadership and some are more of the veteran types. Been there, done that. So I'm pretty excited to see this secondary as the year goes on. But starting wise, I feel pretty good about your corners. Safety was obviously a focus in the transfer portal. I think they picked up 3 safeties. The guy they got from Texas, though, Mason, is the one.
Mhm.
We
Kite.
can go back and look. Jaron Thompson.
Yep. Yep.
Jaron Thompson is a guy that he's going to be playing. I mean, I don't know if he's going to start every game, but that's a guy that you're going to need his help. And I think he's going to be able to oblige. What do you think about the secondary? This was a pretty good secondary last year. I remember
Yep.
sitting and thinking before the season last year, said, "Daggum, it's going to be pretty hard to throw on Auburn. You're going to have to run the football on them." And hey, anytime as a defense you can make an offense get into an obvious situation, that's a win. That's 30% of the battle if you can see what's coming. So I think this defense is going to be good again in a lot of the same areas as they were last year.
Yeah, I mean, starting off with Kay and Lee, this is one of my favorite cornerbacks in college football in general right now. I think he's going to have a really good year. I think he kind of steps up and becomes the lockdown corner. And then you've got Keontae Scott on the other end, who's got the veteran leadership in that defensive back room, and is nobody you want to throw against either. So you got
Right.
two pretty much studs at cornerback, and then you got Kite coming in behind them, who's got some reps. And he'll probably find a way to see the field. Maybe play some
Yeah.
star and play and move him around to get your 3 best defensive backs on the field at one time, or best cornerbacks, I should say, on the field at one time. Then you mentioned bringing in Thompson. They still have Caleb Wooden, who I think is pretty serviceable for a safety, and then also Champ Anthony, who's gonna play star a pretty good bit. So to me, this unit is the best of the defense, or maybe not the best, because we did just talk up the linebacker room a pretty good
Linebacker's
bit.
pretty damn
But
good.
they're
Yeah.
pretty dang good at linebacker. So, but this is a really good unit in its own right, and you've got the 2 most important positions at cornerback filled with some absolute playmakers. I think that if you were to break down all of these players on defense, you would look at those 2 cornerbacks and say these might be 1 and 2 on this defense, and then the rest of the secondary just needs to play pretty dang good, and I think they'll be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that front 7 can help make this secondary look even better. If they
Mhm.
can figure out a way to get after the quarterback, then it makes the secondary's job just that much easier, and makes them look that much better. And this is already a stout secondary. So if they can get any help at all, Mason, I think this will be one of the better secondaries, probably top 5 in the SEC. I would venture to say. Very, very good room there. I'm very excited to see that defense. Let's look at this 2024 schedule, man, and let's kind of talk through this thing. You want to take us through those first few games and kind of tell us what you think? Look, life's never easy as an Auburn Tiger. You're you're always going to have a hard schedule, right? You still draw Alabama, you still draw Georgia, add Oklahoma. What do you think about this thing? Take us through and let's talk this thing out.
Yeah, I mean, I think for an SEC schedule, this is pretty manageable for the most part. You already knew you were going to get Georgia and Alabama, so I think the schedule makers went kind of easy on you for the rest of it. You don't get Texas, you don't get Ole Miss, you do get Missouri, who's a better team as of late, but Oklahoma is kind of your new kid on the block that you draw there, and I think that they're really in a pretty good spot. You you go week by week here. You got Alabama, A&M. That's a win. Cal should be a win. New Mexico, hey, Auburn's
Cal and New
had.
Mexico were pretty tough. Or it was New Mexico State last year, wasn't it?
Yep,
That they
it
lost
was New
to.
Mexico State, but those teams from New Mexico, I don't know. But no, that should be a win for Auburn for sure.
Yeah.
So you're starting off 3-0. I think people have got a lot of questions on Arkansas. I want to say that Auburn is ahead of Arkansas right now. With Sam Pittman being on the hot seat over there. I do like what Arkansas is going to have going into this season, but ultimately I feel better about the Auburn program. As of right now, Oklahoma is going to be a tough matchup. I'll tell you, Oklahoma is going to be pretty dang good this year. I don't know how they'll fare as the season goes on in the SEC, but they're in week 5. I think that's a tough matchup for Auburn in that game. And then right after that, you got to go play at Georgia. That's your toughest game, of the season in Athens at Georgia, number one team in the country. I presume they'll still be the number one team in the country at that point. Probably not going to win that game, but hey, they were within a touchdown last year, so you definitely never know. Then you do get a bye after that. Then you got to go to Missouri. A tough matchup. I think Missouri's a little bit ahead of Auburn as a program right now, but it is one that Auburn could sneak up and get for sure.
Yeah.
At Kentucky, that's a pretty fair matchup in my opinion. I think Kentucky's going to be pretty good this year, but I give Auburn a slight edge there as well. And then Vanderbilt's a win. Louisiana Monroe is a win. We don't really know what we're going to see out of Texas A&M at this point with a new coach and staff. But I expect them to be pretty good. That's definitely not a team you want to overlook before you head to the Iron Bowl and go play at Bryant Denny there at Alabama. That's going to be a tough matchup as well. Auburn's still obviously a little bit behind Alabama, even under the new coaching regime. But we saw last year that Auburn is very capable under Hugh Freeze of beating Alabama. I think that when you look at how Alabama is trending to regress in 2024 in comparison to what Auburn is expecting to be in 2024. That's a game that Auburn could very much win in a wacky game in the Iron Bowl, as it is every year. That's definitely one that you could win. Overall, Vegas has this as a 7.5 win total over and under. I'm definitely more bullish on Auburn than that. I think that, it's tough to say 9 wins, right? You look at the schedule and there's probably 4 that they won't be favored in.
Mhm.
And so it's tough to say that they're for sure going to get to 9 wins, but I think 8-4 is probably where this team ends up. The 4 losses could be as cut and dry as saying, Georgia, Alabama, Missouri, and Oklahoma are your 4 losses, but we know how college football works. I think that Auburn's capable of winning really any of those 4 games, and I don't expect them to lose all of those games. So I think that they end up picking up 1 or 2 of those games and dropping a couple that they maybe shouldn't lose. But ultimately, I've got them as an 8 or 9 win team in 2024, and I think that's a step in the right direction as this team is trending towards, like you said, a 2025 season where they're actually really competitive and they should be a fringe playoff team at that point, if not in 2024, because I do think this is going to be a much improved program overall.
Yeah. Most teams, and think I'm pretty accurate in saying most teams lose a game they're not supposed to. And I could certainly see, um, you know, dropping that game at Kentucky or losing to Texas A&M or something like that.
Mhm.
I think that at Georgia is a loss. I mean, I think Auburn's won 1 game at Georgia in the last 20 years or
Mhm.
so. I mean, it's And the odds of this team being the team to get it done, I don't really see that happening. Um, so I think that Georgia game's a loss. I think at Alabama, if you were just going based upon point spreads or a power index, obviously Alabama's a better team than Auburn is right now. I think Missouri's a better team than Auburn is right now. A lot of weapons coming back for Missouri on that offense. So I think there's three pretty obvious losses there. Not to say that Auburn couldn't sneak up and win one of those games. Almost beat Georgia last year. Should have beat Alabama last year. And there's absolutely no excuse for losing that game at the end of the year last year. But I could 100% see dropping a game that you really have no business dropping as an Auburn Tiger. But hey, that's college football for you. And listen, if you're an Auburn Tiger fan and you made it to the end of this video, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss anything. This is going to be one of the best seasons that we've ever seen. This 2024 season was the whole reason we made this channel right here. This is what we've been getting ready for over the last couple of years, and I cannot wait to experience it with all you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into the First and Long College Football Show. Again, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and don't forget to drop your prediction for the 2024 season and these Auburn Tigers in the comment section. I would love to know what you all are thinking. I'm saying 8-4 this season for the Auburn Tigers. We'll revisit all this stuff after the season, and you can all laugh at us at how wrong we are on a bunch of these things. It's hard to predict this stuff in June, in July, and all that good stuff. So thank you again for everybody watching. Come and join us. We're going to have live shows every single week throughout the season, and we hope that you'll be there. Thank you. Have a great night.